Oh, I gotta go for the weekend.
Yeah, let's start on the weekend.
You gotta look in your calendar.
Yeah, that's when I saw it.
Check your calendar. I mean, it's on
Check
there.
the to-do. You follow my to-dos and hit me. View all. That's your friend.
Okay, view all on the to-do. That too.
Because it tells you exactly what day things are due in
Right.
the class.
Right. Okay. And guys, I'm sorry if I didn't say something in class about there being an assignment. I lose track of who I've talked to and when. You know, we're all going through that. Okay, so all right, we're gonna go back across the pond. Okay, we're gonna do some foreign policy here for a little. We got Great Depression, right? Dust Bowl, all this bad stuff going on. Okay. All right, we're going to talk about something called the Kellogg-Briand Pact. Okay, so those of you watching the recording, there's going to be a test next week. Okay, if you're here on Monday, you'll have a test. Well, that's this group.
Yeah.
I've only got one class. Okay, so you at home, your test will be Tuesday. When?
ACT something.
Crap.
Wednesday.
Okay. All right. So the Kellogg-Briand Pact. This is 1928. So we're kind of taking a step back. We've almost made it to 1932. Okay. So taking a little step back here and doing some foreign policy, and we're looking at Calvin Coolidge at this time. He's president. Okay. And his Secretary of State is a guy named Frank B. Kellogg. Okay. Yes, of the Kellogg Empire. Okay. Now, he is influenced by this man, the French foreign minister, Aristide Briand. Okay, and this is what I was just talking about when we talked coming out of World War I, the isolationists. Okay, trying to avoid another war. So we created, remember the Five-Power Treaty? U.S., Great Britain, France, Italy, and Japan all limited the size of their navies. This is disarming ourselves so that we'll be less likely to go to war. Here we go, baby. 1928. A promise of 60 nations to renounce war as an instrument of their national policy in relations with one another. Now, when Frank Kellogg invited the French foreign minister, Aristide Briand, to address both houses of Congress on this idea, most members of Congress were like, this is a bad idea. This is stupid. But the American people heard it. The American people were like, we want that. We want you to sign that. Okay, the Senate is going to have to agree to this. One of the things we'll learn in government is when it comes to treaties, you got to have 2/3 of the Senate on board. Okay, so we're going to join this. All right, Kellogg-Briand Pact, what it becomes known as. Now, it is kind of nice to know, ladies and gentlemen, that we have reached a point in humanity where the great nations of the world can sit together at a table, hold hands, sing Kumbaya, and basically outlaw war on our planet. It's truly a wonderful day in human history. That's why you guys all heard of this, right? Like the Declaration of Independence. I mean, it's right up there with it. Now, this is a nice idea. It makes you kind of feel warm and fuzzy inside that you're doing something for humanity to prevent war from happening. Yes? Okay, so how are we going to enforce this? Let's say one of these countries, say, I don't know, Japan, attacks China. How are we going to enforce this if Japan violates it? By going to war with Japan, which is what we're trying to avoid in the first place, yes? And there's nothing in this document that says if one of these countries violates this, they will no longer be a country. We will all attack them. All 59 other countries are going to invade and stop them. That's not in there. So how do you enforce this? It's a piece of paper. You understand me? Now, when historians look back at this, they call it naive, childish, idiotic. It gives you a false sense of security. To think that this is actually going to work is naive. Okay? Here's Coolidge with a bunch of members of the Senate and the signing ceremony and other heads of state. So this relies solely on a moral force, not a military force. Okay? Moral force of world opinion. So if Japan attacks China, everybody's going to be mad at them. It's symbolic. It gives us this sense of security that we don't need to put ourselves out there to look out after the interests of other countries or other people, because we're all safe now. We can isolate ourselves. We don't have to worry anymore. I mean, why do we even have a military when we have this? Of course, you guys check my, cynicism, this facetiousness. Yes. Because that's fun. Okay? Now, this would help lead to a greater isolationist policy by the United States. Okay? Now, coming out of World War I, guys, we showed the United States of America was a force to be reckoned with. That we could mobilize from war. Remember, we went from the 16th largest army in the world to the 3rd largest army in the world in a matter of months. Okay? So, we could have led. We could have gotten involved in some of these disputes, but we chose not to. Okay? In the 1920s, in an era of relative prosperity and economic growth, we didn't really need to be leaders, foreign policy-wise. But in the 1930s, our strength is sorely missing from the world stage because of our isolationist ways. Okay? Now, I don't begrudge anybody the opinion that the United States should be an isolationist nation. Okay, if you don't think the United States should get involved in other people's business, I don't have a problem with you thinking that. I just want you to know there could be repercussions for that. Because we are, among the strongest nations in the world, probably the strongest nation in the world. So, our absence can lead to problems. Now, remember economically what we were doing during this time period with other countries? Tariffs. Okay, so we're cutting off trade with other countries, and we're isolating ourselves militarily and diplomatically. We're going to sit nice and cozy between our two oceans, protected by those two oceans, protecting our own industries with tariffs, okay, and not getting involved in other people's business so they don't attack us. And everything's peachy until 1931. Okay. So this is good stuff. This is like important, relevant isolationism. These are lessons that we can look back on after World War II and say, wait a second, how did we act after World War I? And what went wrong? And how can we fix that from happening again? Follow me? Because we're going to behave far differently after World War II than we do after World War I because of what's going to happen between the wars. Okay? Now, got to introduce you to somebody. A guy named Benito Mussolini, who's going to come to power in Italy in 1922. And he will employ a new system of government called fascism. Mussolini is the first fascist. He coins the term. Now, it began with the Black Shirts, which was a group of people that helped Mussolini take over Italy. Okay. And he starts talking about a new Roman Empire. Okay, you remember Rome? Yes? And how the Romans conquered much of what today is Europe, yes? And extended out east as well, past Constantinople. Mussolini starts talking about a new Roman Empire. Now, if you neighbor Italy, does this begin to worry you? Yeah. So when I told you about the Five Power Treaty that limited the size of navies, and I asked you, which one do you think was the first to violate the Five Power Treaty? And we came up with France eventually. It's because of their neighbor to the south, Mussolini. They're saying to themselves, okay, was France once part of the Roman Empire? What modern day France is? Absolutely. So we would be a likely target of the Italians. Why are we limiting the size of our navy? Remind me. You know, it's self-preservation here. You know what I mean? That's why gun sales in this country have gone through the roof. Because people feel like, for self-preservation reasons, they need a gun. Because there's groups of people out there that want to get rid of the police. And you know that's not going to happen, right? Now they're trying this in certain places. This isn't government class. Get back into this. Okay. All right. So Kellogg-Briand Pact is going to have little or no positive effect. Okay? It could, you could say, has a negative effect, giving us a false sense of security. Okay? Allowing us to slip deeper and deeper into isolation. Good? Can't tell I like foreign policy. Come on. Oh my gosh. Oh, I don't know what that's all about. You know what's coming. All right. I know you guys have been wondering, like, I've been teaching for a while now. You kind of been wondering, you know, Mr. Ebright, what's going on in Latin America during this time period, right? Exactly. So let's talk about that. Okay, this is kind of key to the future. All right. Coolidge, when he was the president, he used the Marines quite a bit. Okay. In 1916 to 1924, the Marines were sent down there to the Dominican to protect American business interests, fruit plantations, sugar plantations. American businesses had gone down, bought land, built, you know, farms and you know, orchards and all kinds of stuff. Okay, and when the governments there started to become a problem for the American businesses, our answer was send in the Marines. Okay. In 1912, 1925, Marines were sent into Nicaragua to protect American business interests and promote governments that were friendly to the United States. You know, help put leaders in that would be helpful to us. Now, you might think that in Latin America, there would be this perception of America, the United States of America, which that in and of itself, when we call ourselves America, it's kind of rude to the rest of the other countries in America. Because this is the Americas, right? We are the United States of America. We are not America. Do you understand? kind of ethnocentric, if you will. Okay. It's kind of rude to them. Now, do you think that these countries south of us might start to think, you know, these people up there north of Mexico, these people are bullies? Huh? You think we might get that perception down there? Yeah, I think so. That's going to happen. Okay. So if we look some more in Mexico, okay, we had tried to help Mexico, helping ourselves at the same time. Okay. Oil was discovered in Mexico. Now, Standard Oil Company had the latest drilling techniques, the latest type of like ultrasound systems that where you could look, you know, send sound waves into the ground and see whether there was possibly oil in certain areas. And so the Mexican government asked our companies to go down there and help them develop their oil resources. Kind of like we did in Saudi Arabia, kind of like we did in Venezuela. Okay? American oil companies went there. Now, the oil companies get some of that profit, right? Our American oil companies. Well, in 1917, on the eve of World War I, remember, we're trying to stay out of World War I. We don't get in until 17. Mexican government nationalized the oil industry, took over. And they said to Texaco Oil and Standard Oil, they said, hey, thanks for coming down here and finding this oil for us and drilling for it and developing the infrastructure to get it out of the ground. We'll take over now. This didn't make people happy. Okay? Didn't make the White House happy. Didn't make the oil companies happy. So these private companies are going to lose millions. Okay? Now, the Mexican government didn't enforce this until 1925. But normally, what would our response have been prior to World War I? Send in the Marines. We never sent in the Marines. Okay? Because when they enforced this in 1925, we were in an isolationist, anti-war state. Okay? So you see a change in our foreign policy here. Okay? So now we would end up boycotting Mexico's products. So would some other nations, Britain would as well. Okay? But this is a day that is still celebrated by some in Mexico. Expropriation, petrolera, oil expropriation. Okay, they call it a fiesta patrias. Any Spanish speakers in here? No. Okay. When Mexico celebrate the day where General Cardenas declared oil reserves of Mexican soil belonging to the nation. Okay. Made a lot of us angry. So, international boycott of Mexican products in the following years by the United States, Britain, and the Netherlands. Then you got who's the president after Coolidge? Harding, Coolidge, Hoover. Well, let's look at Hoover in Latin America. Okay. You get a different president, you get a different Secretary of State. Kellogg was Coolidge's Secretary of State. Stimson, Henry Stimson, will be Hoover's Secretary of State. And Stimson's going to try and repair some of our relations with our southern neighbors, Latin America. Okay? And what becomes known as the Stimson Doctrine. It says it's really a reflection of the Monroe Doctrine. Now, I know since you guys are honors students, you all remember the Monroe Doctrine, right? A little bit? What do you think the Monroe Doctrine is? Anything, like Just throw it out there. Okay? Yeah, similar, yeah. We told Europe to stay out, right? We told Europe, you stay out of our hemisphere. We'll stay out of your hemisphere. We won't bother you, you don't bother our side. Okay? So what the Stimson doctrine does is it says to Latin America, it says, you know what? We've been getting in your business so much, we're going to promise not to do that anymore. Unless American lives are at stake, we will not get involved in your country, even if we don't like your leader, your political culture. We're not going to get involved. Okay? And the attempt here, which is really smart, is to try and create friendly relationships with everyone in our hemisphere. You remember one of the reasons why we went to war in World War I was the Zimmerman telegram, right? Which was trying to bring Mexico into the war against us. If everybody in our hemisphere is our friend, do we ever have to worry about being invaded unless it's from across an ocean? So this is smart foreign policy by Stimson, and Roosevelt, our next president, is going to double down on it in what's called the good neighbor policy. Okay, so this is a strategic move, and honestly, probably a kind move on the part of the United States, not to be kind of the bully in the neighborhood. You know what I mean? And so we will see some positive results for this, okay? And when it does come to World War II, guys, this pays dividends, huge dividends. Because by the time the war is over, World War II is over, every single nation will declare war on the Axis powers. Germany, Japanese, and Italy. Italy will drop out, but the German and Japanese axis. Every one of them. Now, Argentina kind of has some pro-fascist stuff going on there, so they were the last one to choose sides. And they chose our side. We chose the winner. Okay. So this has really worked well. Now, as you guys know a little bit of history after World War II, when communism began to spread, obviously Cuba falls to communism in 1959. And so now we got some issues. And then you got issues in El Salvador, you got issues in Guatemala, Panama, and other places where, again, we're going to start sticking our nose in their business. Okay? But this is good. This is good policy. It's effective at securing us as a two-ocean nation. Okay, so we had no right to intervene in neighboring states when accepting the protection of American lives. We would accept political life down there whether we liked it or not. Okay, that's the Stimson doctrine. Okay. All right, next slide. Good here, everybody good? So this, I put this in here. You can see American troops. Cuba, 1898, that's the Spanish-American War. Plata, 1901, 1906 to 1909, we had interventions here. 1917, Veracruz, 1914, that's in Mexico. Haiti, Dominican, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Nicaragua, Panama, and so forth. Okay? So we had a lot of intervention in this region near around the beginning, at the end of the century and the beginning of the century, of the 19th century, 20th century. United States, Latin America. You get it? Yeah.
Who's the other cat?
Yeah, the cat one's, we're talking about some pretty boring stuff, I think sometimes depressing, so now I'm stuck on that again. My bad. It's okay. I'm back, baby. All right. Second to last slide, guys. Here we go. So tomorrow, be a review day for the people that are here. And I'll talk about what to expect on the test. So your video tomorrow will be pretty short to watch for this class, okay? Because we're going to finish here. All right? I'm going to turn off the light. Come on, over here. All right, guys, this stuff we're going to be talking about here is going to be important for a length of time as we move forward in history, okay? Because I'll keep coming back to this. All right, so try and acquaint yourself with the geography here, okay? Here's Japan. This is the Korean Peninsula. This is a part of China called Manchuria. Okay. Peking, this is where Beijing is today. Okay. So you can kind of see this where the capital of China is today. Okay. And then obviously China, a very large country. Hong Kong down here, Shanghai here. Okay. Major cities. And then down here you have the Philippines. Okay, it's important to remember the Philippines during this time period is an American territory. There are American military, American civilians living in the Philippines. Okay, so you look strategically, that's important. This region here is French Indochina. Okay, so you got what today is Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia on this peninsula here, Siam, which is today Thailand. Okay, and then Burma over here. Okay, so in 1931, there's a dispute. Now, let me back up a minute. Okay, there was something called the Russo-Japanese War that happened at the end of the 1800s. Okay, and when that war was over between Japan and Russia, Japan kept this peninsula. Okay, so the Korean people were under the subjugation of the Japanese from about 1903 to 1945, the end of World War II. So if you want to look at one group of, Asian people that may dislike a group of Asian people, the Koreans towards the Japanese, you have like 40 years of oppression by the Japanese of the Koreans, okay? Now, there's going to be an incident at the border between Korea, which is Japan's, okay, and China. All right. Now, this is pretty much, from what I understand, fabricated by the Japanese. It wasn't like a real offense to them, but they created this event to give them a reason to attack China. Okay. This is in 1931. So the Japanese military, which has been, Japan has been militarizing for some time now. And they want to become, they've industrialized, they want to become powerful. And they need more land. They need more raw materials. So they are going to invade, okay? This will become a puppet state, okay? Which basically means you leave some Chinese people in charge. You feed them wine, women, and song, wealth, all the things, that people would want. And they do your bidding for you. You treat them like a puppet. You tell them what to do, okay? There's a really good movie about this called The Last Emperor, okay? And this is the last Chinese emperor, okay? And how the Japanese go in and, create this puppet state called Manchukuo. Manchukuo. We got Manchuria, Manchukuo. Everybody say that. Manchuria, Manchukuo. Okay? Now, were we shocked by this? Yeah, the whole world is shocked by this. Some people weren't surprised. And guys, remember that thing we signed in 1928 where 60 nations said that they would not go to war unless it was for defensive reasons, right? Japan signed that. So we've got an international organization to deal with things like this. Now, the United States isn't part of it, but there is that international organization. What's it called? Not the UN, the League of Nations. Remember that? Okay. So let's call up the League of Nations. We got to do something about this. This is wrong. Okay. Now, we send an American observer to the League of Nations because we don't have an ambassador because we're not part of it. We never joined. They invoked the Kellogg-Briand Pact. And they outlawed Japan. Now, if you can tell me what that means, please do, because I'm not sure to this day. The Japanese delegation, which was there at the League of Nations, their delegation, their ambassador, folded up his papers and walked out. Jeez. And just walked out of the League of Nations. Stunned silence. When it was just like, this international body, this pact that everybody thought was going to prevent war on this planet was shattered. And a third grader could have told you that. It's going to happen. Okay? Now, how do we respond to this? This is going to be important because Japan's going to check the reaction of the rest of the world here. Now, the United States, which is very powerful, Secretary of State Stimson says, let's put economic sanctions on Japan. Stop trading with them. Let's encourage other nations to stop trading with Japan so that we can weaken them economically and they will stop going on the warpath. Follow me? Hoover says no. Because if we stop trading with Japan, we're going to become their enemy. And then we're going to be a target of the Japanese. And we don't want that. Okay? He didn't want to provoke a war with the United States. So who's going to do anything? Are the French going to fight the Japanese? Are the British? No. Nobody's going to do it. Is the Soviet Union going to do something about this? Nobody's going to do anything. This sends a strong signal that people don't want war. So if you do, there's probably not going to be anybody there to stop you. The American people and the rest of the world sat on their hands. People didn't want war. We were in a depression. We're worried about our own problems. We don't care about a bunch of Chinese people. Who cares? It's none of our business. Let me tell you something, guys. The Japanese are brutal. They are awful to the Chinese. Okay, from 1931 throughout the decade of the 30s, the Japanese will incur further and further into China. You can see these little yellow spots as well, okay? And eventually they will get here too, okay? But the treatment of the Chinese, you got to understand here, guys, the Japanese worship their emperor. Emperor Hirohito is said to be a demigod. He is a descendant of the sun god. The emperor, sorry. Okay, so they're worshiping their emperor that is godlike. Now, remember, you guys all know about the Nazis. Everybody knows about the Nazis, okay, and how they believed in Aryan superiority, yes? Well, guys, the Japanese believed the same thing about their race, that they were superior to all other races, including the Koreans and the Chinese. Okay? They were the enemy. Have you heard of the rape of Nanking? Huh? You're from there? Oh, wow. So you're taught that in school?
Yeah.
Okay. I teach it too. Now, guys, this is one of the worst atrocities in human history. The rape of Nanking. A city of around 250,000 people. And the guy that was in charge of it was a guy named Prince Yasuhiko Asaka, I believe is his name. And basically, when they went in to Nanking, now obviously a lot of the Chinese men were being called up to fight in uniform, okay? But the Japanese military at this point is far superior. They're better trained, they have better weapons, they're better organized, okay? They're good at what they do. And what they do is kill people. Now, once they went into Nanking, guys, and why they call it the rape of Nanking, is because almost, I mean, I don't want to say every, but more estimates between 200 and 250,000 men, women, and children were murdered by the Japanese. And most of the women were raped. Not once, but multiple times. Chinese girls and Chinese women. This is one of the worst atrocities in history. Okay, and there's some really good movies on this. Okay, and I know it's a good movie about an atrocity, but you can learn from it. Okay, and one is called just The Rape of Nanking. Now, Iris Chang wrote a book called The Rape of Nanking, and the movie's kind of based off of that. Now, Iris Chang is Chinese. Okay, so obviously she may have some bias in writing this book, yes? But there's another really good kind of a more Hollywood production called War of the Flowers. A little bit out of time, but the Catholic Church was in Nanking too, okay? And so the Catholic Church, there was a priest there, and as the Japanese came in, they were bombing. And this is the first time we ever see the bombing of using airplanes to bomb civilian targets. First time ever. Okay, is in this war here. And the priest is killed in a bomb. And he's got there's a Catholic church with walls in it and so forth. And it's an orphanage for Chinese girls, young girls. It's a Catholic church. And so there's an undertaker sent in to bury the priest. The undertaker's played by Christian Bale. You guys know who that is, Batman? Now, he's kind of a grifter type guy. He's not like holy or anything like that. You know, he's just sent in to find the priest and bury him. And when he gets there, he finds this church, this orphanage of young girls. Okay, and the Japanese are coming. And so the movie's about how he responds to that. And it's just, I mean, it'll make you cry. But it's a great movie called The War of the Flowers. Okay. So yeah, guys, you know, I'd really like to bring this up because not a lot of people are aware of the rape of Nanking, and and there's a lot of information on it. Okay. Now I do make an exception in this class for the book you have to read for this class. I need to assign. It has to be 20th century American history. But if anybody wants to read, it's hard to read. If anybody wants to read The Rape of Nanking for this class, you can do it. Okay? All right. By Iris Chang.